The first episode, Let You Down, begins with a top-down perspective of Corpo Plaza in Night City, at night from the neon-lit buildings. Lieutenant Colonel James Norris of the NUSA military is briefly shown before the scene transitions to a crime scene, with voiceover dialogue from the police. After becoming cyber psycho and shooting a police officer through his car window, Norris, who is heavily armed with cyberware, assaults the other NCPD policeman and turns onto Sandevistan. In the end, MaxTac can breach Norris's system and defeat him. When David Martinez is introduced in the following scene, having just witnessed Norris's recollection of this horrific incident in his mother's apartment, the spectator is then made aware that the activity that was being presented was a brain dance. Then, Doc contacts him, admitting that Jimmy Kurosaki, the master editor, gave him this BD directly. David is awaiting the door while gazing into the washing machine, which is still filled with his damp school clothes. After that, he wakes up his exhausted mother, an EMT in the living room. They talk about the money he would need to pay for his class's essential upgrade. Gloria wants him to use her money to pay for the legal update. David is irritated and claims that Doc assisted him with it, and there's no need to worry. They're cut off by breaking news regarding Lieutenant Colonel James Norris's death and missing cyberware from Network News 54. When David first sees his mother with the corpse bag on TV, he's overjoyed, but she abruptly cuts the show off and sends him off to school. Gloria calls a person named Maine before the focus shifts to David on his way to school, but the audience is kept in the dark about their conversation. The song Who's Ready for Tomorrow is playing as David strolls through the congested, dilapidated streets. He briefly thinks he sees a female with white hair, but she quickly vanishes and he keeps walking. When he eventually makes it to Arasaka Academy, his AI instructor promptly reprimands him for not wearing his uniform. A wealthy student named Katsuo Tanaka verbally assaults him and disparages David's technology. David boasts of his ways of obtaining the pricey Wreath update, but the subsequent meditation session is disastrous and is harmed by David's illicit software. She calls Gloria and David to the principal's office and pledges to cover the cost of the repairs. David's poor behavior in class is called up by the principal, who also doubts Gloria's financial status and advises David to leave Arasaka Academy. David has every right, according to Gloria, to attend. Gloria confronts David in their car on the way home, and they continue to argue about the issue to the point that David considers quitting, since he sees no future for a Santo child at Arasaka. Gloria is devastated because she put in the additional work for David since she wants him to achieve in this world. Their journey abruptly comes to an end as a car belonging to the Animals gang pulls up next to them, and the gang members start firing. The next vehicle the gang fires flips over and hits Gloria's vehicle. David awakens to find himself surrounded by burning auto pieces and buried beneath them. He can see his mother laying on the sidewalk in the distance. When the trauma team comes, they're both refused first assistance since they're not customers of this service. The incident that follows demonstrates how David was able to escape and get his mother to a dilapidated hospital where she had surgery. The physician gives David a suitcase containing his mother's possessions, but she must remain in the hospital. David must realize when he gets to the flat that the rent is overdue and that it's locked. He enters by breaking a window. The missing cyberware from the Cyber Psycho event that was depicted earlier in the episode, Norris's Sandevistan, is discovered when he opens the suitcase containing his mother's belongings inside. David gives Doc the cyberware implant, but Ripper Doc only wants to pay $10,000. So David abruptly ends the call. David looks at the statistics of Sandevistan. The following scenario begins with David returning to school the following morning. He sees a seductive vision of the girl with the lovely dancing white hair he saw the previous day. But this time, the vision changes to Katsuo's disapproving visage. Katsuo repeatedly taunts David in an alley before ultimately beating him with a Strong Arms 400 equipped with martial arts chipware. David, who's hurt, collapses in the alley, and the clinic calls to inform him that his mother has passed away. He traverses the streets of Night City while wearing Gloria's EMT jacket and her cremated bones. While doing so, he picks up a number of voicemails, one of which is from the hospital, who previously mentioned David's institution transfer and who emailed Gloria their payment information. To the tune of Let You Down, David enters his flat after leaving it with the ashes. He tries to sell Doc the illicit software again, but this time he declines and would only pay $6,000. At the same time, when David is distraught and unable to handle the circumstance, Katsuo calls and makes fun of him and the passing of his mother. David's eyes immediately fix on the cyberware in the bag because of his rage and loss, and he recognizes his opportunity for vengeance. With this, the recap comes to an end. But don't you worry, more recaps are sure to come your way. David Martinez, who works at Doc's Ripperdoc office, requests access to James Norris's Sandevistan. He's cautioned by the doctor that the cyberware is too much for his body, but he later changes his mind and starts the grueling procedure. David joins his classroom at Arasaka Academy after his return. While giving a lecture, the AI instructor corrects David. When David turns around, the surgical blood smears on the back of his EMT jacket are visible. Before Katsuo can continue to make fun of David, he throws him out of his chair and challenges him to a fight. David starts the Sandevistan for the first time, while Katsuo displays an aggressive combat stance. David can move around Katsuo because of the implant's ability to slow down time. He knocks the youngster out by slamming him against a piece of glass, fracturing Katsuo's nose in the process. David is threatened to inform his dad by Katsuo, who whimpers and starts to call him names. Only David departs. The following scene shows David strolling through Night City's sunlit streets while wearing an EMT jacket that's covered in blood. He enters a plaza and laughs out loud. He appears to vanish into thin air, which surprises the onlookers. The scene changes to his mother's former apartment, and David enters to clean the jacket in front of the washer. He attempts to unwind on the couch after a long day. Marcus identifies the assailant of his kid for him and describes Norris's cyberpsycho event and implant. They are aware that David now has the implant, but unlike Norris, he doesn't appear to be experiencing any negative side effects. Marcus is confident that David would be a good candidate to test their product. The audience is made aware throughout this dialogue that Davis was dismissed. Tanaka doesn't appear to have much empathy for his own kid and prioritises the business, which he expects of his son as well. David is still sitting on the apartment's couch when the principal of Arasaka Academy calls. He declines the call and then takes a shower before returning to the streets of Night City. When David utilises the N-cart, he suddenly experiences the strange sensation that something is happening behind his back. He spots a woman with the white hair picking out individuals on the train and uses the implant to slow time so he may grab her hand. He's instantly pulled away by her. After speaking with him, she takes him by the throat and throws him against the train wall while observing his data with interest. She suggests they collaborate after learning about the unlawful Sandevistan. It seems that she particularly watches for Arasaka suits to steal from. She now welcomes David to the group as her trainee and introduces herself as Lucy. Both start their pickpocketing endeavours by utilising David's skill. Before they exit the train, Lucy puts them to the test with a range of other victims. Lucy phoned for an ambulance, and the following scene shows David being carried on a stretcher. The current EMT talks about David's condition and requests his immunosuppressants. Lucy first appears unconcerned, as in unaware of David's insurance. The EMT then evidently wants to double check the information and briefly vanishes. When the EMT comes and threatens them with a pistol, Lucy finds that the ambulance has already left. Young David can fire the implant 8 times in a single day, which would be stressful for an adult. Doctor cautions him about the implant's potential for psychological harm. Lucy takes out the stolen chips. She can only buy medication for 2 days. David and Lucy kick the stretcher in the EMT's stomach, then opens the door and have a wild trip on the highway. Outside, Lucy is awaiting him. They discuss their next steps for repaying his obligation to her as they settle down on a seat. After the discussion, she extends an invitation to David to stay at her flat and gives them beer. She forces him to remove his mother's jacket before putting it on herself and programming the back of it to read Edgerunners. He learns from Lucy that it's just another way to say cyberpunk. David acknowledges that he enjoys JK's Edgerunners books. He then tries to alter the topic by pointing out a poster on a wall that promotes a new life on the moon. David and Lucy first discuss his mother on why he chose to attend Arasaka Academy, even though he never felt at home there. Then, Lucy suggests her own aspiration to really leave Night City and go to the moon. She then extends an invitation for him to join her as they link into a simulation. They spend a few minutes in the lunar simulator when a call from Maine tells David, "You fell over the edge, punk!" David is then ejected from the simulation. Just to look at Maine and his gangmates' expressions, David returns to reality. Maine demands the Sandevistan return because she finds it amusing that David has it installed. Lucy is utterly unperturbed as she sits next to him. David is beaten in the face by Maine, who also threatens him. A rocket ascends into the night sky to mark the episode's conclusion. With this, the recap comes to an end. But don't you worry, more recaps are sure to come your way. The episode opens up in Lucy's apartment, where Maine and two of his gang members, Dorio and Pilar, are threatening David. Maine is upset and believes that his contact deceived him, even if he finds it hard to accept. David understands that Maine is referring to his mother Gloria. He tells them he's her son, but she passed away 2 days ago in a gang-related car crash. Although Maine presents as intimidating and brutal, it's obvious that he's saddened by Gloria's passing. David shows the group how to use the Sandevistan by taking Pilar's cigarette from his lips and then putting it back, since David's body still hasn't convinced him that his body can handle the potent implant. Maine finally decides to accept David as one of their apprentices after giving it some thought. David, who had believed he could trust Lucy, feels let down by her and departs. David is melancholy and is simply gazing at the urn at Gloria's former apartment. The scene abruptly goes dark. The next morning, David is once more on the streets, still furious and discouraged. David gets a message from the Academy's principal, who extols his academic achievements and even proposes a scholarship that would allow David to attend Arasaka Academy once more. Only an apology for his attack on Katsuo Tanaka is anticipated from him. The communication is abruptly cut off by David, who then gets a call from Maine asking him to meet his friends in a warehouse. In addition to seeing Pilar and Dorio once more, Kiwi, a new crew member, is also introduced to the audience. David must now accompany them on a robbery, where they want to steal the navigation information of Maxim Kunetsov, a bulky Arasaka bodyguard and the driver of Tanaka, their real target, to establish himself. They staged a boxing match to divert Maxim's attention on his day off, and as a result, Maxim drowns his grief over the lost wager in alcohol. David then had the opportunity to picklock him using Sandevistan's skills. The theft, however, doesn't go as planned, and they're unable to read the data in time when Maxim gets a call from his employer and starts to leave the pub. As a result, they opt for a different strategy and attempt to read the data from the Villefort Alvarado V4F 570 delegate. David and Lucy get in the car, but as they're attempting to gather their belongings, Maxim emerges from Rebecca's distraction and stands next to the vehicle. They immediately take off once David stands on it. Maxim placed a reward on the vehicle in the interim, and soon after, 2 members of Tiger Claw started to pursue him. When they're nearly stopped by a traffic congestion, David may utilise the Sandevistan to change lanes so they can continue their route. They can take the car to Aldo's when one of the Tiger Claws has a deadly accident. They're taken aback by the second Tiger Claw member there, who starts a fight between them. David is knocked to the ground and just seconds away from being chopped to bits, but Lucy can seriously hurt the assailant. When Maine drives up in his automobile and shoots the Tiger Claw, the situation is rescued. Despite the fact that the theft did not go as planned, they rejoice outdoors in front of a pub. Maine and David become better friends, and Maine is welcomed as a new team member. Maine continues to caution him, though, that he must obtain more chromium since his body is primarily biological and can't sustain an implant like that for very long. In the meantime, Pilar is attempting to amuse partygoers with his juggling skills. An approaching automobile abruptly ends the enjoyment. A lean guy with several eyes emerges, and it's revealed to be Faraday, a renowned fixer. He criticises Maine for the botched theft and the data that is now worthless. Maine apologises for their behaviour, and Faraday offers him new instructions to hold off until they see moves made by Tanaka, their intended target. He keeps this thing quiet and withholds further information. Once more, Faraday leaves in his car, while Maine says that because he has the money, people like Faraday are the most crucial. David is anxious after this encounter and is not in the right frame of mind. But he is calm and rejoins the party. Even from a distance, he can see Pilar attempting to approach Lucy. Reappearing, Rebecca attempts to strike David. He accepts her drink as she extends a warm greeting to the group. David calls the principal to discuss the message he had earlier received before the show comes to a close. David ejects the principal from the conversation and doesn't plan to apologise for what he did. He then makes another attempt to locate Lucy at the gathering. She appears to have left with Pilar. With this, the recap comes to an end. But don't you worry, more recaps are sure to come your way. David is eager to get the hang of his new chosen mercenary career in Cyberpunk Edgerunners, the Netflix anime series created by the video game studio CD Projekt Red and the Japanese animation studio Trigger. Maine's crew debriefs after their final work at the neighbourhood dive club Afterlife. Maine and Dario talk about how Faraday's partial revelation puts their team at far greater risk. David phones and begs Maine to teach him more about the industry. In order to deliver cargo to Pilar, the crew member with robot arms, he's dispatched to Aldo. David's training then starts in earnest, as Lucy explains to him why endurance is still necessary, even for Edgerunners and Netrunners. Maine imparts to him some experience from his many years of playing the game. He receives advice in hand-to-hand combat from Dario. David works out every day to improve his strength and conditioning. In the meanwhile, the team completes various assignments and even faces off against a competing crone gang. David sustains a few injuries along the process, especially considering how obstinately he refuses to learn how to shoot, and how eager the evil guys are to damage them. To be fair, David does attempt to practice shooting under Rebecca's guidance, but his thoughts of his mother constantly surface and prevents him from doing so. He's developing ties with each member of the team in the meanwhile. He never fails to notice Lucy while making valiant attempts to convey his romantic interest. David spends money on a fresh pair of artificial lungs toward the conclusion of one expedition, so he can keep up with the physical demands of their missions. After spending the evening in the Afterlife pub, the group runs across a random man who has a penile implant while they're returning to their headquarters. He's peeing into a barrel from atop a cargo container. His urine is loud and repulsive as it hits the metal drum's rim. Pilar makes the decision to bother the rude man. He gets shot in the head as the angry man shows a hidden gun on his wrist implant, just as he's going to make a joke about the man's penile implant. It comes completely out of the blue. David is the last to respond, while the rest of the group stands still for a few moments. The man who is peeing is obviously a cyber crazy. While the cyberpsychology launches a rocket at them, May knocks David away to safety. The passing of Pilar, Rebecca's brother, causes her to lose her cool. Maine commands Kiwi to trick Rebecca's brain and put her to sleep. Becca falls silent. David is concerned about Lucy while the crew fights the cybermaniac. She can access the cyberpsycho systems and ignite his augmentations. Then David surprises the man with his Sandevistan quickness and shoots him in the head. David is unaware that the cyberpsycho is still alive when he checks on Lucy. Before the online madman can shoot David, Maine cuts off his head. When it's all said and done, Rebecca, Pilar's sister, is terrified. Lucy is hurt and Pilar has passed away. The cops are also en route to deal with the commotion. Maine determines that while they remain back and deal with the questioning from the authorities, everyone who has should go to the Ripper Dock for repairs and medical care. David brings Lucy home once the Ripper Dock has fixed her up. Their personal and sensitive conversation leads to them experiencing their first kiss as they hang out on a rooftop while watching spacecraft take off towards the moon. Maine's crew is still mourning Pilar's passing in the episode of Cyberpunk Edgerunners anime series on Netflix. But David feels like he's finally catching onto the edgerunning game. After the police have departed, Maine and David discuss the extended hacking hands augmentation that Pilar left behind at their headquarters. Insisting that Pilar's sister Becca has authorised its use, Main implores him to take it. David claims he would much rather have Main's large rifle hands augmentation. As Kiwi enters the conversation after conducting her own cyber research, she reveals that she's learned their old target Tanaka had a penchant for gory and disgusting braindance film that was specifically created by someone by the name of JK. David recognizes JK as Jimmy Kurosaki, a favoured boutique braindance editor. Kiwi, Main, and David figure out that if Kurosaki is Tanaka's preferred braindance editor, he would need to see the editor in person to receive custom tuning. He won't have any bodyguards or muscle with him. Therefore, he'll be there by himself. They can take use of this actionable intelligence. They locate Jimmy Kurosaki's reservation at his preferred posh eatery. To learn more about Tanaka's braindance tuning schedule, they attack him in the parking lot. They're preparing to attack Kurosaki when the editor emits an EMP pulse. David and Main are both defeated by it. While Dario and Kiwi are hiding in the abduction car, it also knocks them unconscious and causes them to feel sick. Their brain implants ring for everyone within range, particularly net runners like Kiwi. When all is over, David has been captured by Kurosaki, and Main is comatose. Dario and Lucy go out to find and capture Kurosaki as Kiwi transports Main back to the headquarters. David awakens in a room filled with corpses after coming to. As the cops pursue him, he is led through a horrific scene of carnage. He moves through the law enforcement by shooting them and then beheading them. David is shot down like an animal and suffers a terrible death as the heavily armed Max Tax SWAT squad is summoned to his head. The shooters mockingly refer to him as Cyber Madman while they do so. Then, while restrained to a chair, David awakens, puffing and terrified. The entire event was a brain dance. Jimmy reveals to him that he saw James Norris, the soldier who developed cyberpsychosis, die. This person formerly owned the Sandevistan that David is currently sporting. David is informed by Kurosaki that all people who wear the augment eventually become insane because of the riggers and the blockers, no matter how long they can withstand the adverse effects of the Sandevistan. Jimmy will document David's dramatic demise in the same way he recorded Norris's. David argues that he won't experience that. He won't experience the same fate as the rest. Jimmy, on the other hand, has witnessed it all, particularly the false belief that all addicts to chrome enhancement hold, that they're physically unique. As David is forced to participate in yet another round of Norris's death, Lucy and Kiwi arrive barely in time. When they manage to free David from the brain dance, Kurosaki's armed drones emerge and start attacking them. Both drones are resistant to small guns and are bulletproof. To distract the drones so that Lucy can quickly hack into them, Dario and David use David's accelerated speed. Main and the rest of the crew prepared for the ambush and arrest of Tanaka, once Kurosaki was revealed and eventually chained to them. Tanaka receives a call from Kurosaki informing him that fresh material is available. The corpo suit shows up in a taxi without a bodyguard as anticipated. Tanaka is cornered by the crew, but he fights back by shooting tiny needle rockets at them to divert their attention. He then stuns Main using his own speed and strength enhancements. Before Tanaka can cause any more harm, Main is able to knock him out thanks to David's intervention and his Sandevistan. But one of the needles managed to go deep into Kurosaki's neck. The cast laments the irony that Kurosaki, a famed braindance editor, won't be able to edit the video of his own demise as he bleeds out. Tanaka is securely in the crew's hands as they leave after learning that Kurosaki has platinum insurance and that a medical and security team are on their way.